Power, legacy, purity. For centuries, these words defined the ambitions of kings and queens, rulers who believed their blood was divine, untouchable, eternal. But behind the golden crowns and glittering palaces lay a secret far darker than any war or betrayal. In their quest to keep the throne pure, they turned their own blood into a curse. Tonight, we uncover the hidden cost of royal obsession, the fragile, tragic lives shaped by generations of inbreeding. These are not just stories of privilege, but of pain. This is the price of purity, history's most genetically compromised. Starting our countdown at number 10 is Isabella II of Spain, a queen whose life was marked by the grim cost of generations of intermarriage within the Bourbon dynasty. Her very existence was the product of a particularly close union. Her father, King Ferdinand VII, was married to his niece, Maria Cristina of the Two Sicilies. This was just one node in a vast, interconnected web. Isabella herself later married her double second cousin, Francisco de Assis. The goal was to secure a Spanish heir and consolidate Bourbon power, but the genetic bill was steep. Isabella's personal life was fraught with turmoil, ill health, and a deeply complicated emotional state. More tragically, she bore 11 children, yet only 5 survived past infancy, a devastating mortality rate that historians often attribute to the cumulative effect of her family's extreme consanguinity. She inherited not just a kingdom, but the genetic debt of her ancestors. Number 9 brings us deep into the labyrinthine family tree of the Habsburgs, the dynasty that virtually perfected the art of strategic intermarriage. We look at Maria Antonia of Austria, an empress who, from a purely genetic standpoint, surpassed her infamous uncle, the disfigured Charles II of Spain. Maria Antonia's parents were first cousins, Emperor Leopold I and Margaret Teresa of Spain. But this was just the beginning. The repeated marriages within the Spanish and Austrian branches of the family created a level of inbreeding so intense that her coefficient of inbreeding was terrifyingly high. Her ancestry was less a branching tree and more a dense, looping vine of repeated names. While Maria Antonia survived to adulthood, her health was always precarious, and she tragically died at the age of just 27, having produced only one son who himself would not live long. She represents a genetic dead end, a quiet yet unforgettable victim of the empire's relentless quest for blood purity. At number 8, we find Princess Alexia of Greece, a figure who reminds us that the tradition of closely tied royal unions persisted well into the 20th century. Born in 1965, her story is less about visible tragedy and more about the enduring patterns of aristocracy. Her parents, King Constantine II of Greece and Queen Anne-Marie of Denmark, were a prime example of strategic royal matchmaking. They were second cousins and third cousins. This meant they shared a significant number of recent common ancestors, including Queen Victoria and King Christian IX of Denmark, effectively creating a double bond. While Princess Alexia and her siblings appear healthy, their bloodline carries the accumulated genetic history of every major royal house in Europe, with all the accompanying risks. Her life is a modern example of a royal family maintaining tradition, confirming that the echoes of that ancient quest for a pure line still resonate today. Coming in at number 7 is Marie-Louise Elisabeth d'Orléans, the Duchess of Berry, whose short, tumultuous life in the French court was a spectacle of excess and sorrow. Born in 1695, she was already the product of a close union. Her parents were first cousins. This was the atmosphere of the French Regency, a period defined by both astonishing wealth and moral decay. Marie-Louise was married off to yet another cousin, Prince Charles of Berry. The consequences of this dynastic pressure and genetic vulnerability were horrific. She endured multiple miscarriages and bore several children who were either stillborn or died in infancy, a pattern strongly suggestive of genetic complications. Unable to cope,
Marie-Louise turned to extreme consumption and alcohol abuse at an astonishingly young age, dying at the age of 23. Her story is a poignant demonstration of how genetic pressures can manifest not just physically, but also in a life consumed by destructive behavior. We step away from royal palaces at number 6 to find Lorraine Whittaker, whose story proves that the legacy of extreme consanguinity isn't confined to the aristocracy. Featured in a well-known documentary, the Whittaker family became a stark case study in what happens when generations of geographical isolation and endogamy are left unchecked in a small, remote American community. This is not a case of political ambition, but one of deep isolation leading to a catastrophic lack of genetic diversity. Lorraine and her family exhibit severe physical and cognitive challenges, consequences that directly stem from the accumulation and expression of harmful recessive genes. Her life is a powerful, difficult-to-watch reminder that the cruel arithmetic of inbreeding is a biological law, one that applies regardless of wealth, title, or the century in which one is born. Taking the number 5 spot is Marie-Louise of Austria, born in 1791, representing one of the last and most concentrated examples of Habsburg inbreeding. The genetic lines of her parents, Emperor Francis II and Maria Theresa of Naples and Sicily, were so intertwined that they were double first cousins, sharing all 4 grandparents. This genetic compression meant that Marie-Louise had a coefficient of inbreeding equivalent to having parents who were siblings. While she did not exhibit the most severe physical traits of her ancestors, this level of genetic concentration guarantees a high risk of expressing latent recessive disorders. Of her parents' 12 children, 5 died in childhood, reinforcing the devastating price the dynasty paid for its obsession with the bloodline. Marie-Louise's life, though politically significant, remains a silent testament to the ultimate genetic gamble of the House of Habsburg. At number 4 is Maria I of Portugal, a queen whose life serves as a terrifying historical example of the intersection of genetic risk and mental health. Her bloodline was tightly controlled, culminating in her strategic yet devastating marriage. She wed her own uncle, the future King Pedro III. This close union guaranteed genetic problems. Maria endured multiple miscarriages, and the children she did bear had an alarmingly high mortality rate. However, the most profound tragedy was her mental decline. After the deaths of her husband and her eldest son, the heir she had struggled to produce, Maria fell into a state of deep, paralyzing, melancholic madness, now believed to be a severe form of psychosis. She was eventually deemed unfit to rule, and her son took over as regent. Maria I's story is a chilling historical case study, suggesting that the cumulative genetic damage of her lineage may have contributed to her extreme, final psychological breakdown. Moving to number 3, we encounter a modern harrowing case, Kimberly Cult, a protected pseudonym. This is not history written in a palace, but in a rural community where intense multi-generational isolation led to a horrific reality. This Australian family practiced inbreeding over 5 continuous generations, creating a genetic bottleneck of unprecedented severity. When authorities intervened, they uncovered a deeply disturbing and complex web, revealing individuals like Kimberly who exhibited profound physical, cognitive, and developmental disabilities. Her case is crucial because it shatters the myth that this is an ancient or exclusively royal problem. It is a modern, documented example of the catastrophic biological cost incurred when genetic diversity is completely extinguished. Kimberly Cult's life is a stark, unavoidable mirror reflecting the tragic outcome of extreme consanguinity. Our runner-up takes us far back in time to ancient Egypt and two tiny silent witnesses. Mummies 317A and 317B. These were the two infant girls, likely stillborn, found in the tomb of Pharaoh Tutankhamun. Their existence is the most poignant evidence of the cost of the pharaonic tradition of sibling marriage, a practice meant to preserve the divine purity of the bloodline. The haunting detail confirmed by DNA is that the girls' parents, Tutankhamun and his wife Ankhesenamun, were half-siblings. Tutankhamun himself was the product of a brother-sister union. By the time the infants were conceived, the genetic risk was terminal, resulting in two short lives marked by evident deformities and frailty. These two tiny, perfectly preserved bodies speak volumes, confirming that even the most powerful rulers could not defy the cruel and unforgiving laws of biology. And finally, at the top of our list, the woman who perfectly embodied the maximum concentration of genetic strategy and risk, Cleopatra II Philopator. She was the living monument of the Ptolemaic dynasty, a Greek royal house that adopted and perfected the Egyptian tradition of sibling marriage to ensure that power never left the family. Her parents were siblings. Her grandparents were also siblings. She eventually married her own brother, Ptolemy VI, and after his death, married her other brother, Ptolemy VIII. This incredible repeated intermarriage across generations resulted in a genetic closeness rarely seen outside of laboratory studies. Cleopatra II was not a victim of unforeseen circumstances. She was the calculated culmination of a dynasty's will, a powerful queen whose bloodline was so tight and self-referential that she stands as the ultimate historical example of a ruler whose very biology bore the concentrated weight of political ambition.